Ladies and gentlemen, the next First Lady of the great state of Nevada, Cindy Reid.
How are you? All right. Well, I'm here to introduce first my husband, and I just want to take a quick minute to tell you a little bit about him because I think I know him better than most people. I know him better than the RJ, and I know him better than his opponent knows him. So I just want to tell you a few things. First of all, the main thing I want you to know is how much he cares about you. We have been traveling this state for 2 years, and every night when we get home after a long day, after Rory asks about me and the kids, he starts talking to me about you, about people who have lost their job, who are working as hard as they can to make ends meet, who don't know how they're going to pay their kids' tuition. And he is truly concerned. And once he's done talking about all the concerns, he talks about what he wants to do to solve those problems. So I want you to take it from me. You are on his mind, and he cares about you. The second thing I want you to know is how much Rory loves Nevada. And I learned this about 24 years ago. In fact, it was 24 years ago this month that I met Rory. He invited me over to his apartment for dinner. And yes, and he started this night by giving me a tour of the apartment. And on his first roommate's door, there was a poster of Farrah Fawcett. Do you remember the one in the red swimsuit? That one. And on his next roommate's door, there was a poster of The Who, because that was his roommate's favorite band. Well, guess what? We get to Rory's door, and on Rory's door, there is a poster of a map of Nevada. And I said, why do you have a map of Nevada on your door? And he said, let me tell you about Nevada. And I proceeded to get about a 30-minute history lesson on Nevada. He had been to every town in Nevada and was so proud. Now, some people ask me why I would go on a second date. Well, let me tell you, I learned then that when Rory cares about something, he is absolutely committed to whoever it is. And I have been the recipient of that for 24 years. My children have been the recipient of that in having a wonderful father. And now you are the recipient of that. He cares about you. He worries about you. He is committed to you. He is committed to Nevada. My husband, the next governor of Nevada, Rory Reid.
Good morning. You know, I always wanted to play the House of Blues. I always did. Don't you think Cindy Reid will be a great First Lady? Well, so far we agree on everything. Anybody here wants to change the state of Nevada? I think the people of Nevada are angry or anxious, and you have a right to be. I'm angry too. Our schools are failing our kids. This governor has done nothing. Nothing. While this economy has crashed around our feet, I think we need a governor with strength and experience that knows how to lead, don't you think? Now, my opponent, Brian Sandoval, he's a weak leader. Has Brian ever managed a large budget? Has he ever created a job? Has Brian shown any ability to make tough decisions? Seems like this campaign he's having a debate with himself. One day he's for something, the other day he's for the complete opposite. Well, I think the thing that's even more troubling about Brian is that he's been the go-to guy for lobbyists and special interests in this state for many years. In fact, they recruited him. A little over a year ago, some lobbyists walked into the federal courthouse in Reno, Nevada, and they walked out with their candidate for governor. And that should concern you, because he will stand with them, not with you, don't you think? Well, I'm going to stand for you. I'm going to stand up for our kids, for our education system, for a new economy in Nevada where we put our people back to work. That's what I'm for, because that will help you, not those lobbyists and special interests. So, if you're ready to change Nevada's economy, to rebuild it from the ground up, if you're ready to transform our education system and to create jobs and bring 21st century technologies to this state, I'm here to ask you to stand with me in this campaign. Will you do it? Well, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you very much. Now, I have a pretty good spokesman here with me today. I have somebody that knows something about helping a struggling state. I have somebody here who led our country at a time that we all fondly remember. He was responsible for the lowest unemployment rate in modern times, the lowest inflation rate in 30 years, and the highest home ownership rate in the history of the United States of America. And since leaving office, this man has continued his work. He's done incredible things. I think he is the best ambassador that the United States has around the world. And I'm confident he's going to do a lot more to make us proud in the coming years. I'm so pleased that he's here. I'm so proud that he's endorsed my campaign, and I'm gratified that he is my friend, and I want to introduce you to President William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I want to thank Cindy and Rory for giving me an excuse to come back to Las Vegas and Nevada. Starting to get cold back east. I want to thank him for making this campaign. I thank all of his supporters who are here. Commissioner Tom Collins, thank you. Assemblyman Reuben Kuhn, thank you for your friendship and for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get down to the meat of the coconut here. This is an interesting year. I didn't really plan to do all this politics, but I'm now the only one in my family who can. The Secretary of State is prohibited from engaging in electoral politics. But I think she's doing a good job too. Thank you very much. Thank you. She did call me from the Middle East and tell me to give a good speech today, however. We're in this incredible economic mess, and Nevada has suffered more than almost any state in the country. And I'd like to begin by saying I hope I have earned a little credibility on the issue of jobs and budgets and making hard decisions in executive positions. And I want to just say one other thing to remind you. Before I was president, I was the governor of my native state for a dozen years. And in the 1980s, when I took office, we had a horrible unemployment problem. All the middle of the country did then. That's when in the 80s, both the East and West Coasts were doing well, and the bottom fell out of the manufacturing and agriculture in the middle of the country. And I want to say something about digging out of a hole, because near as I can figure it, the Republicans' argument for the national elections is we left them in a $3 trillion hole, and they had 21 months to dig out of it, and we're not out yet, so put us back in so we can do what got us in the hole in the first place. And then there's a larger argument which extends to the governors. Vote against all those governors too, because all the Democrats are for just big government, and government's going to take our liberties away and crush individual freedom and crush small business and put us back in there too, so we can do at the state level what we did at the national level. And right now, a lot of people seem to be buying it. And so I want to talk to you about what I think this election ought to be about. Right now, everywhere I go, the polls are reflective of widespread anger among people who feel totally disempowered and shafted, and think everybody in power, whether in the private sector or in government, is doing just fine, and they're getting the shaft. There's a lot of truth to that. And then there's a lot of apathy of people who were motivated to vote in 2006 because the economy was already terrible before the financial meltdown, and then voted again in 2008, and now never voted in a midterm election before and don't know why they should vote. Either they don't understand the consequences of not voting in off presidential years, or they're disappointed that not all the problems of the country have been solved. And then there's a fair amount of amnesia out there. People forget, a very wise man once said, we must remember the past or we're condemned to repeat it. So I just want to talk to you about that. Because when I was governor for 8 years in the 80s, until I ran actually from almost 10 years until I ran for president, starting in late 1991, my state only had an unemployment rate below the national average 1 month until I ran for president, and we led America in job growth. Why? Because I had to work for 8 years to dig out of a hole that started 40 years before I began and got blown open in the 1980s. So here's what I have to say about this campaign. He can't win if everybody in in Nevada. He can't win if everybody in Nebraska votes for him. He can't win, I got in real late last night. He can't win if all the electorate is motivated by anger or apathy and has amnesia. So you have to say, what should this election be about? First, let me say that we should allow everybody to own their anger. A lot of you are probably still mad. You ought to be if you're not. The question is, when you're angry, can you calm down enough to make constructive use of your anger? I'm from Arkansas. It's just above Louisiana. They have a huge Cajun culture, French-Canadian culture, and they have a very bizarre sense of humor and tell wonderful jokes. But the best example I know to make the point I want to make about how anger can give you the result you don't want is about these two Cajun friends that run into each other, Jean and Pierre. So Jean comes up to Pierre and he says, Pierre, every time I see you, you have these nice expensive cigars in your pocket. How come you don't have them anymore? He said, because that no good Ramon, every time he see me come up and say, hello, Pierre, he slapped me on the chest and he ruined my cigars. He said, but now you've got dynamite in your pocket. He said, that's right. He said, well, the next time you do it, he'll blow you up. He said, I know, but I'll blow his hand off. Every one of us who has lived a certain amount of time can remember a decision we made in anger that was wrong. About 80% of the time when you make a decision when you're mad, having nothing to do with politics, you're going to make a mistake. And you might get exactly what you don't want in life. So people should hold on to their anger, but it shouldn't cloud their judgment. And in terms of, and second thing I want to say is about apathy, about people that were motivated to vote last time and this time is this, you got to go tell them citizenship's not a one-off. You might as well vote against your interests as to stay home. Don't forget, not very long ago, Nevada had the fastest growing economy in America, and you can again, you just have to shift gears and do something different. So you can't expect the state to embark on a new direction, getting you new results, if you don't participate in it and you don't know what to do. So, for whatever it's worth, here's my take. If you don't want this election to be about anger, apathy, and amnesia, and you want Rory to win, then I believe more than anything else, it depends on what the voters think the election's about. And here's what I think it's about. And it's what I thought about when I was president, and it's what I do now. You know, most of my life I spend in countries where people are living on less than $2 a day. They'd kill to be in Nevada in this economy. In Haiti and Africa and Latin America, East Asia, places where I work, trying to help build economies and healthcare systems and education opportunities. But I also spend a lot of time in other wealthy countries and raise the money to do that work in the poor places. So I keep up with what's going on in the world. And I spend an hour a day still studying this economy, trying to figure out what would I do, what would I do, what would I do. And I think the only thing that matters when you're in a public office, this is what matters. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? Do children have a brighter future? Are things coming together or being torn apart? The rest of it's all background music. You can't make a decision about that if all you got is anger and apathy. You agree with that, don't you? Okay, so I think, here's what I think the governor's race ought to be about. I think the only thing that matters is, what are we going to do now? We're in a fix. And who is more likely to do it? If this election is about what are we going to do now and who is more likely to do it, who will win the election? So, okay. Most elections are determined by the quality of the candidate and the conditions of the moment. But sometimes a fever takes over when things are really bad and people get disoriented and they can't hear and can't think. You got to go out and talk about what we need to do and who is more likely to do it. If you can make this election about the right questions, he will win the election, because you can't reach any other conclusion if you look at their comparative records and their comparative positions on the issues. So for whatever it's worth, this is what I think, based on 12 years as a governor and 8 years as president. And as I said, when the Tea Party crowd, for example, says there's too much government, remember, I'm the only president in modern history that cut the size of the federal government. It was the size that Eisenhower had in his last year when I was there. The leadership of the other party in the White House for 12 years before I became president quadrupled the debt. Then my last 4 years, we had surplus budgets. We paid $600 billion down on it. If they'd kept it, we'd be out of debt by 2015. But they thought it's more important to give me 5 tax cuts while we were fighting 2 wars and give benefits to you they weren't paying for, so they doubled the debt again before the meltdown. The result was, after 22.7 million jobs, they only had 2.5 million before the meltdown, where we lost 7.5 million. So here's what I think. The most important thing is you got to diversify your economy and get more jobs here. Good jobs. Okay. Now, I don't read much, but I'm going to read you this. His opponent, as near as I can say, has said nothing about this. Rory has said Nevada could become the first state in the country to be completely energy independent. And if you If you invest in clean technology and give exemptions for the purchase of solar and geothermal and wind equipment, and then you attract the people who make that stuff here because you can use it more. I mean, look, the sun shines and the wind blows here. Last year, America was rated, of all countries in the world, second and third in the capacity to generate electricity from the wind and the sun. Of all the countries in the world, of all the states in America, you name one where there's more sun and wind than here. Right? So you're sitting on a gold mine that will put everybody to work. And in the short run, you could take all these people that lost their jobs when the construction shut down. Unemployment in construction is 25% nationwide, and it's higher than that here. And they could all go to work day after tomorrow if we decided to fix every school, every college and university building, every hospital building, every big hotel, and make them as energy efficient as possible. And all you got to do is put the people who own those buildings in a just say yes position by letting them pay off the cost of retrofitting and hiring all the construction workers through their electric savings alone. It's easy to do. One candidate has a plan to do it, the other one doesn't. Trust me, I have thought about this and looked all over the world. The people that were doing the best before the meltdown and the people that weathered the meltdown best were those that created a new energy economy. It is the best single thing you can do to put Nevada back to work. Okay. The second thing we've got to do is to get the money to finance it. And I'll say more about the stimulus in a minute, but we got to get the money. We got plenty of money. You know what Willie Sutton said? He robbed the banks because that's where the money was. The banks in America today, have $1.8 trillion in cash uncommitted to loans. They're not making those loans because of uncertainty and they're afraid now. They're like, this is the phase where the cat won't sit on the cold stove. You know the old story? If a cat sits on a hot stove, it'll never sit on one again. But the sad thing is it won't sit on a cold stove either. We need to unleash that. This is the clearest way to do it. It's the safest kind of loan. All these jobs are guaranteed for their savings, for the cash flow to pay the loan back. The corporations of America are sitting on $1.6 trillion. They do not want to invest overseas. They want to invest in America. They want a healthy American economy to buy their goods and services. We need to get them to invest again and offer the incentives to invest again. I talked to one corporation president about 3 weeks ago. I've known for 35 years. I said, how much money you got in the bank? He said, $1 billion. And I said, and? He said, I know what you're going to say. I could hire 10,000 people tomorrow. I said, and? He said, I got 100,000 employees. I can't put their jobs at risk, and I have to know the cost of this, 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 and this before I make up my mind to do it. That has to be done at the national level, but we've got to resolve all those uncertainties and get that money flowing again. And the third thing we have to do, comes back to the governor, is to make sure if you have the jobs available, you have the people to fill them. Now, I'm going to tell you something really important. In last month's economic report, and like I told you, I've been working at this for more than 20 years. I guess more than 30 years now. God, I'm getting old. And it stunned me. But in the unemployment report by the Labor Department last month, which said the unemployment rate went up a little bit because we got more private sector jobs, but we laid off the census workers, their work was done. Way down in the report, there was this stunning fact that should have gotten more publicity. It said for the first time since World War II, posted job openings, that is, I will hire you this afternoon, okay? Posted job openings are increasing in the United States twice as fast as job hires. Now, you may find that incredible because we all know examples where a job got open and hundreds of people applied for it. But here's what happened. There are two problems. One's little, one's big. The small problem is more than 10% of Americans and far more than that of Nevadans are living in homes where the mortgage is worth more than the house, so they can't move. The far bigger problem is that the jobs require skill levels that the people in the area don't have. Now, the way to solve that is to make sure you have an immediate, ongoing, intensive training program run by the community colleges or the labor unions or the employers, so that you do it all the time while people are still on unemployment. Now, Rory Reid has got a plan that will make all post-high school education more relevant to Nevada's future and keep funding it at an appropriate level, and then make sure more people can go by making the public schools better using the models of those things that are working in this state. His opponent wants to cut both, K through 12 education and post-high school education. And if you do it, you can offer all the tax incentives in the world, and people will not come because they will not be able to get the people to do the jobs that are available. So if this is not close, this is not a close question. The other thing I would say is, the last thing I want you to know is that I'm really concerned about this federal deficit, and you know I am because I got a record, right? But the right way to handle it is the way they're handling it now. They got a bipartisan commission, co-chaired by my former chief of staff, former president of the University of North Carolina, and a guy that created jobs for 20 years for a living and ran the Small Business Administration for me, Erskine Bowles. And they're going to come up with a long-term plan to do this. But if you tried to do what a lot of the Republicans wanted to do now and have massive cutbacks now, it would make the deficit worse. Why? Because the problem today is very different. When I became president, because they quadrupled the debt, interest rates were high and people couldn't get money. Today, interest rates are virtually zero and people aren't asking for money. And people don't want to loan money because nobody knows what to do because we've been shattered by this shrinking. So if you try to have a big tax increase or a big spending cut now to balance the budget, it would only increase the deficit. We've got to get that under control. But what caused this mess was too much risk and too little oversight, right? Because they got, basically, I've told a lot of people that if they just kept the guy who had the Securities and Exchange Commission, half of this stuff wouldn't happen. Now, I spent a lot of time looking at the countries that did well. Here's the relevance for Nevada. The countries that did well in this crisis. And I'll tell you, too, that you'll be familiar with. Canada has done very well. Australia has done very well. They both have vibrant free market economies. They both have open trading systems, but they both have growing manufacturing bases. They're doing well. You know why? Because they had proper oversight and they didn't let their banks get out of hand, and they could loan $10 for every $1 they had in cash, but they could not own $34 like Bear Stearns did. And they did well. So Nevada has some responsibilities. His opponent sponsored a bill to deregulate banking so that they could do here what happened in New York and all over America. I don't think that's a very good idea. I think you want somebody as governor who understands that if you want a vibrant free market, you have to have oversight. Otherwise, they always have tended to destroy themselves for 400 years. And the final thing I'll say is this. Being governor is a job. Like being president is a job, being head of the county commission is a job, being mayor is a job, running a country is a job, running a company is a job, running the labor union is a job, running a school is a job. They're jobs. And you got to think about that. There are going to be a lot of very difficult decisions to be made in the short run about the budget and about who goes into what position and what you emphasize. It's no accident that one candidate has put out a detailed plan, Rory Reid. You don't even have to guess what he's going to do. You can just read what his plan. And the other fella looks great in a suit. You know, and I confess, you know, now that I'm old and gray-haired, I probably resent him. He is a handsome dude. He looks great. But we don't have a clue what he's going to do because he's never done it before and he doesn't have a plan to do it now, except he wants to cut K through 12 education and your post-high school education. So you got one person who has proved that he can make tough decisions. You've got one person who has honored your intelligence by giving you a plan so you don't have to guess what he's going to do. You've got one person who has identified the quickest area to put Nevada back to work, to diversify its economy, to build a whole different future, making yourselves energy independent. Jobs today, jobs over the long run. You've got one person who understands the relationship of your post-high school education programs to being able to fill the jobs that he wants to create. And you've got a person who's shown that he will support the business community by making it financially attractive to locate those new jobs in Nevada. So if the election is about what are we going to do and who is best suited to do it, now you know the answer. So, now, this is not your typical political speech. You're all for him or you wouldn't be here. There's no point in me giving you a bunch of hot air things you can just scream over all the time. You need to have information to go talk to other people. He can win this election, and he will if the people know what it is about. And this general argument against my party that there's some great government attempts to take over America, it just doesn't hold water. Just remind them that the last time a Democrat was in for 8 years, he left you with the smallest government we had since 1960 and 4 surpluses. This is not... But I didn't leave you with a weak government. I believe in oversight, accountability, investment, and keeping score. And what you're going to get is exactly what you don't want if you don't elect him governor. This is a great opportunity for Nevada to take a whole new course, to build a whole new future. But you can't do it without a plan. And you can't do it without economics. It's the single most important thing now. You got to know where the new jobs are coming from. You got to have a plan to finance them. You got to have a plan to train people to do them. And you've got to protect the quality of your education system to do it. If you do that, everything else will begin to fall into place. And we'll be digging out of this hole. Now, let me just say one final thing because it's part of this narrative. The other party is always saying that we're the big government party and we tried it with this stimulus and it didn't work, and that just proves how crazy it all is. Let me give you the facts before I go. The hole we were in, starting in 2009, and we'd been digging it a long time, the whole 8 years, right? By 2009, it was $3 trillion deep. The stimulus was $800 billion. Everybody that gets to the 3rd grade knows that $800 billion doesn't equal $3 trillion, right? Now, the difference was even more important because 2/3 of that stimulus was to enable us to tread water. That is, it went to aid to state and local governments so they wouldn't have to lay 1 million teachers and healthcare workers off. That was great, but it just held us firm. And it went in tax cuts to middle and lower middle income working people so they could keep going to the grocery store. A lot of people have forgotten how desperate it was at the end of 2008. And keep the local grocer open. It was great, but it just enabled us to tread water. Of that $800 billion stimulus, only about 1/3 of it went to invest in new jobs, in infrastructure, roads, bridges, and water projects, things like that, and clean energy projects. Not all of that has been spent yet because you've got to roll it out in a sensible fashion. And every single independent study shows that more jobs were created than was anticipated. Just last week, another economic study came out and said if there had been no stimulus, instead of the national unemployment rate of 9.5%, it would be 11%. And you can imagine, therefore, if Nevada hadn't gotten its $3.2 billion, what would have happened to you? It's simply not true that it didn't work. But all it did, we were in a deep hole, it enabled us to stop digging and take the first steps on the way out. There's nothing wrong with this country that we can't fix by what's good with this country. We can get out of this. But we do not want to go back to government at the national or the state level by the people that dug the hole. We've stopped digging. We can't bring back the shovel brigade. What we've got to do instead is to talk sense to the American people, respect their anger, counter their apathy and say, we have no interest in apportioning blame here. We're only trying to erase your amnesia so you can think about what we should do in the future. All that matters is, what are we going to do and who's best qualified to do it? If you will take some time every single day between now and the election, especially the younger people here, especially you, you got more at stake, and all the surveys show your age group is the least likely to vote. And you got more riding on this election. You need to go out and talk to people about what I've said. Where are you going to get the jobs? And a whole different energy future. Let Nevada be the first energy independent state in America and generate untold jobs. But we gotta finance it, and we gotta make sure we got people trained to do it. And you can't do that by backing away from your education system. You gotta back into it and make it better and better and better and better. That's what you have to do. Will you do that? I'm telling you, coming to a rally is not enough. You're going to vote, and you're going to vote for Rory Reid. If all you do is go back and tell people what a good time you had at the rally, you haven't done anything for them. You've got to talk to people. Television ads are not as effective as they normally are in an election like this because people are mad, are disheartened and apathetic. But when a neighbor or a friend or a family member looks them in the eye, somebody they trust, they know, someone who cares about them, someone whose life is no better than theirs, looks them in the eye and said, I get how you feel, but the only thing that matters is, what are we going to do? We're going to sit around here and be mad and feel sorry for ourselves, or are we going to stand up, dust off, and do what this country has done for more than 200 years, figure out what do we do now, and go rip it? Rory Reid will do that, and he should be elected. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Rory and Cindy Reid will be available to greet guests and take photos in the House of Blues restaurant as you exit. Thanks again for your support, and please remember to vote.